Hello, welcome back.
It's been a long time. I should have left you. Step two.
Okay, but all jokes aside, I hope you are all doing well. I know I've been inconsistent, but I've been since the beginning of the channel, so do not act surprised. But anyway, we are making a pajama set. We're gonna start with the pants first in this video, and part 2 will be uploaded, I don't know, in a couple days. If you're interested in the pattern, link will be in the description. And now let's begin. You will need these tools for the project and fabric of your choice. It could be linen, it could be satin, it could be anything else. The pants has 2 cuffs and 2 leg pieces, and 1 leg is the front and back combined. First thing to do is to sew the piping onto the bottom edge, but before you do that, undo the thread of the piping. The amount to undo is the width of the seam allowance, which is 1 centimeter. Then cut off the rope. Sew the piping onto the edge with a zipper foot. If you don't have a piping foot like me, the piping was not planned by the way, but this year I want to do more stuff that I normally would have avoided. But the piping is totally optional. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. Here is a close-up footage. Try to sew closer to the stitch line than I did here, but it will be better later on. Cut off the excess and undo the threads on the other side, then cut off the rope. This is to avoid thick layers when sewing the inner seam later on. It's a tedious thing to do, but we all know what can happen if you don't do it, so you better do it. Now lay the cuff on top of the main piece with the pretty sides facing and sew the 2 pieces together, again with the zipper foot. Place your fingertips like so. I've noticed by doing this that I was able to sew closer to the piping. Then repeat the same steps with the other piece. You can also trim the piping length first, that it matches the bottom length of the leg piece. I don't know why I didn't do it in the first place, by the way, but yeah, now you can see. Again, I'm using my fingertips to push the piping to the foot in order to sew closer to the piping. Next, search the seam. If you don't have a serger or you are too lazy to grab it like I was, you can use this handy presser foot, which I forgot the name of. If you do not have overlock stitches on your sewing machine, you can use the zigzag stitch instead. Here is a close-up look. It looks good, and again a great alternative if you only have a sewing machine. Searching the edges with the sewing machine was a bit too slow for me, so I went for a French seam instead. To sew the French seam, fold the pants in half with the wrong side on the inside. The pretty side should be facing you. You can also sew the crotch seam first, but for me it made more sense to do the inner seam first with the French seam. But if you're gonna do a normal seam with the right sides together, then you can do the crotch seam first, then the inner side seam. The first seam is sewn. Now it's time to press the seam allowance. First, I'm going to show how to do it the right way. You press the seam allowance open like so, then you press the seam flat on the other side. But what I always do is pressing the seam flat like so. Then I'm flipping the piece inside out. Then I press the seam allowance on one side. Why? Because it is a faster way to do it and I'm lazy. Right then, trim down the seam allowance to 3 mm. For this, it is helpful to use a smaller scissors that I'm using. If you have pressed the seam allowance the right way, then you need to trim the seam allowance on both sides. Also be careful that you're only cutting the seam allowance and not something else, otherwise you will have a bad day. If you are finished, flip the piece inside out. The wrong side is now facing you. Fold the seam flat with your fingers or use the iron. It is important that the seam is right on the edge. You don't want the raw edges sticking out of the seam. So the new seam allowance 1/2 centimeter away from the edge. This is the end result, and this is also a good alternative if you only have a sewing machine. Repeat the same process for the crotch seam. Also, I need to mention that I made a mistake when making the front seam. I made the first seam allowance 1 centimeter wide and the second seam allowance 1/2 centimeter. But what I should have done was making the first and the second seam allowance 1/2 centimeter. Because the seam allowance in this pajama is 1 centimeter. And you know, 1/2 centimeter plus 1/2 centimeter is 1 centimeter. 1 centimeter plus 1/2 centimeter is not. So yeah, everything I did with the piping was for nothing. Moving on, hem the cuff, fold the tries to hide the raw edge, remove the space so that you only have the area for, you know, the thing for the sleeve to make it easier to sew. To sew sleeve and stuff, that stuff. Measure the elastic around the waist until it feels snug. Trim off the desired length. Divide the elastic into quarters. Fold the elastic in half, then mark the midpoint. Then fold the elastic in half again to mark the other midpoint and do the same on the other side. Sew the ends of the elastic together with a zigzag stitch. Go back and forth a few times. I like this method because there is no bulkiness, but you can also overlap the ends if that is easier for you. Divide the pants also in 4 sections. For this you can only do the sides where there are no seams. Attach the elastic onto the top edge of the pants, sew all the way around. Make sure to stretch the elastic. Until the mark of the elastic and of the pants matches. Use this foot thing, whatever the name is, with the zigzag stitch. Hold the elastic from behind if it doesn't go forward. And here is a close-up look. We are almost done, we're almost done. Fold the edge 2 times to cover up the elastic, then sew all the way around with a straight stitch with the regular pressure foot. Be sure to stretch out the elastic while sewing. Congrats, you have made your own pants. I will see you in part 2. Share the video if you like it. Follow me on Instagram. And yeah, that's all I needed to say. See you soon. Bye.